Everyone, and welcome to our beautiful production room here at the Stone and Chalk offices in the Tech Scale Up Hub in central Sydney. We're going to give it a couple minutes just to let everyone that's registered join our room, and we'll get underway. But we're super excited to have you all here today. Okay, so whilst we're waiting for everyone to come in, a couple little housekeeping rules. This is a recorded webinar, so if you're wondering, will I get the recording afterwards? Absolutely, you will. We're excited because obviously we've got quite an international audience today as well. So for those of you over in the US that are logging in, thank you so much for doing it in your night time. But you'll get the recording afterwards as well if you want to share it with your businesses. Our Q&A is manned, so all your chat and questions, please pop them through into the Q&A, and we'll get started momentarily. Okay, well, thank you all for dialing in today to our first webinar that we're holding here at Lumiant headquarters in Sydney. We're in our lovely production room with some special guests. So today, as you all know, we're here to talk about Lumiant's recent partnership with InvestNet Yodlee. For those that don't know, InvestNet Yodlee, they're a data aggregation and analytics platform for financial services. So the partnership for us at Lumiant's really important, and soon we'll chat a little bit more about that, but it's going to let us utilise InvestNet Yodlee's financial data for our clients to enable them to share their financial situation with their advice professionals, of which you all are. So today, to explain how this all works and how the partnership's going to work, I'm joined by Chris Dadej, our Chief Product and Tech Officer here at Lumiant, over here on my right, and a couple special guests that have joined us in our office here from Yodlee. I've got Tanner, Regional Sales Manager here at Yodlee, and John, Head of Open Banking at Yodlee. So we're going to have a bit of an informal chat, bit of a panel Q&A for you all here today. So as I mentioned at the start, if you've got any questions, please pop them through to the Q&A box and we'll absolutely carve out time towards the end to answer those for you. The people that are here with me in the room will absolutely have all the answers, and I'll just ask the questions. So to cover off what we're going to go through today, I'll shortly hand over to Chris. He's going to talk a little bit about, from a Lumiant perspective, why this partnership's really important to us and why we've chosen to partner with Yodlee and how it's going to look for you as Lumiant users in the wealth module and the entire Lumiant platform. Chris will then take you through a little bit of a walkthrough around that wealth module and how the integration works. And then we're going to hand over into Yodlee to talk about how all the background stuff works. One of the key questions we always get around integrations is, that's all great, but what's sort of happening behind the scenes? You know, what sort of voodoo is going on? And Tanner and John will help us uncover that and tell us a little bit more about Yodlee so that you have that confidence in how it's working for your customers. We know that data is really important to be secure and know where it's coming from. And then, as I mentioned, right at the end, we'll get to all your questions and give you some answers. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Chris Dadej, our Chief Product and Technology Officer. Chris, how about you tell us a little bit about the choice for Lumiant to work with Yodlee and what we're looking to achieve?
Yeah, thank you, Mark, first and foremost, and thanks, guys, for coming in from Yodlee to kind of, give us the details, under the covers of, how it all kind of happens. I guess my role here, first and foremost, is to kind of set the scene about, how Lumiant got to this point where we kind of decided to partner with InvestNet Yodlee, and it is very much a partnership in terms of how we're thinking about kind of going forward. So we went live in the Australian market about 18 months or so ago with a number of foundation groups. We've kind of grown that over time. Very shortly thereafter, we started bringing on customers from New Zealand, and then earlier this year, we decided to actively launch the product over in the US. And whilst, for the majority of what our platform does, we're focusing on that financial well-being and that aspect of it, the reality is you always need the quantitative side of it in the platform just to kind of wrap things up to provide a holistic kind of experience. So we needed data, as is always the case, and we needed a holistic set of data, which is the hard part to do. We're huge believers in open banking. We think that is absolutely the future. It's the scalable, it's the secure, it's the most efficient way of getting data. Personally, I love the idea of being able to put all of the privacy and security aspects back to the client, to basically go, the client is going to allow us access to this data for this length of time. And I think that's just a brilliant model of it, which really beautifully aligns with what and how Lumiant is operating. But at the same time, we know that open banking, depending on where you look around the world, is at different points of evolution. In some places it's available all over the place. In other areas, it's a lot more patchy. We know that it's going to improve over time, but we obviously need something in the meantime to allow us not only the data that is available with open banking, but also the data with potentially much smaller financial institutions, which is not yet ready and may not be ready for some time. I personally have worked with Yodlee probably about 7 years ago. It was the first time that I engaged with them on a different business, different product, but very early on got an idea about just the scope and breadth of their capability, or being able to connect to the entire wealth of financial institutions, and just the ability to kind of grab data from almost anywhere. A lot of the technology back then was obviously screen scraping, and obviously it's now kind of evolved. The big thing here for us, really, coming back to that previous point, was we needed two things out of a partner for this sort of data. One, we needed someone that could do things globally, because we have plans to expand beyond Australia, New Zealand, and the US into other markets. We also need a partner to be able to get a holistic view of a client's wealth across all of those different organizations. And so we understand that they need to be not only really strong on the open banking side, but equally strong on other ways of achieving that data. Screen scraping may be one of those ways. Having talked through with investing at Yodlee, it became really clear that they had the other ways completely down pat and world leading in that regard. And on the open banking side, they could support us in all of the key markets that we are live today, and all the key markets that we're kind of thinking about going next. So it was almost a kind of an obvious partnership for us to get into. The discussions that we had with Yodlee right from the get-go was very much, we don't want to just think about Australia. We want to think about this as a global partnership. How can we help each other in this regard? And so it's been brilliant from that point of view. The guys will obviously talk to it from a investment at Yodlee point of view, but from a pure Lumiant, pure product point of view, it just means that we have a single partner that we can go to that can integrate into and retrieve all of the data that clients have about them, both from existing platforms, but also from assets held away. So assets that they might not necessarily deal with their advisor, but they've got kind of pockets, broking accounts, saving accounts, insurance policies that they may not necessarily deal with the advisor, which obviously gives us an advantage of being able to show a whole of wealth view into that client and into that household's assets.
So to that end, Chris, you sort of alluded to it. We'd love to sort of walk through the product and where sort of that integration works for our Lumiant community who's joining us today. They'll be looking at their Lumiant platform. We're going to take you through our wealth module where the Yodlee integration sort of interacts with the Lumiant portal. As we do that, Chris, maybe you want to walk us through how it works, what's happening from a Lumiant perspective, and what our Lumiant users could expect to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't see the video, so I'll pretend that I can see what's happening. What you'll be able to see, obviously, is our wealth module for existing clients of Lumiant. You would have seen this for a while now. In that this gives you that in-depth, not only kind of balance sheet view of of assets, liabilities, and your net position, but also the underlying holdings held within each of those portfolios, and also what tax structures they're actually held in. Where Yodlee comes in, obviously, is to basically help power and help speed up the input of that data into the platform. So what you can see on the screen in front of you is being able to log into Yodlee, select the accounts or the financial institutions that you hold assets in, be able to put in all of your login details, and then really importantly, also select which accounts you want to synchronize. So, coming back once again to that whole view of the client, this being fundamentally the client's data, and we want them to be in complete control of it. They get to decide which accounts they want to include in the platform. Ideally, all of them. That way, the advisor gets a full view. But likewise, there may be certain accounts that they want to keep out, in which case they're in complete control of it.
And that's really important from a use case perspective. We see sometimes, clients when they have logins and they have business accounts as well as individual accounts. They work with an advisor on an individual account, but maybe not the business account. So it's a really cool functionality for us. If I take a short pivot, no doubt if you've got questions around maybe where this heads for us next around the Yodlee integration, or how I'm going to expect it if I log on tomorrow and look at wealth and want to start connecting it, start popping those questions in the Q&A box down the bottom. But let's pivot a little bit. Tanner, if I start with you, mate, tell us a little bit about yourself, about Yodlee, and sort of for those that haven't really worked with you before.
First and foremost, I guess, thank you guys for having us. To be quite honest, it's a privilege to be able to speak to your clients directly, and it's been great to partner with you guys. To be honest, it's been a dream ride, and I think in terms of Yodlee, if we could just speak about the partnership to start with, I think it's been a real great fit in terms of what we do together. Yodlee being a global data aggregation business is one point. I'll get to that in a second, but really I guess what we're trying to achieve first and foremost is to empower an intelligent financial life, and to partner with Lumiant to be able to achieve that on a global scale is really, really exciting for us. So Yodlee, I guess, really simply, we are a global data aggregation business. We have been in the business for quite a while, so 24 years. We work across 37 different countries as an organization, and really in those markets, as Chris alluded to earlier, a lot of that has been screen scraping traditionally. But as we see the pivot globally into open banking and what that looks like, and really the power of being able to give that consumer the power over their data, that's a really big, important part for Yodlee, and we're really pivoting to become the global leaders in that market. So we power open banking in the UK, in the US, in Australia, obviously New Zealand as it comes through as well. We have teams under John and with John that will be working into a number of different markets as we go forward. I guess for us, it's being at the forefront of those markets, working with regulators, working with the stakeholders in country to make sure that those markets are the best they can be in the CDR world. Really looking at our experience across the global kind of markets that we work with, particularly the US and Australia, as we go through. But for us, again, to come back to that intelligent financial life, there's a lot of elements to that need to be perfect and world leading, especially when you're talking about aggregating financial data. And we know how important it is in terms of being able to securely access that data, but first and foremost, but then also being able to access the level of data that you really need across those different markets. So again, business data, but then also containers within those retail banking or business markets. So investments, obviously very important to Lumiant customers, but then also banks, bank data, transaction data, credit data, loan data, even rewards data. And so that holistic view of your customers' financial life, to be able to give, pertinent financial information is what we really kind of build to as an organisation, and that's why that this partnership makes so much sense for us.
Cheers, Tanner. And John, I'm sure you're well versed in explaining the concept of open banking. But if you could, in a really short manner, because I would assume it's quite complex. Yeah, of course. Do you want to maybe talk to us a little bit about what open banking is, why it's so important to us, why this is a bit of a groundbreaking moment for all of us doing it together? So yeah, in short, tell us a little bit about open banking, and we've got some feedback already. Just mic right up.
Yeah, cool. So, I guess open banking is about giving, consumers and businesses the right to share data with parties that are trusted. In many countries now around the world, this has sort of become a regulatory obligation for businesses, banks, telecommunications, all sorts of things to provide this data when customers consent to it to those third parties. For an end user, I think it all really begins with the consent process. So you saw the demo video. Essentially, the end user, is presented with what data they'd like to share and what it's for, and those things. They're redirected to the financial institution. They do an authentication process to prove that they are who they say they are, and then they agree to share the data. Essentially, once that consent process is done, in the back end, a kind of consent is set up, and then we can go directly to the bank or the investment company or whatever it is, and access it in a secure way on behalf of the customer. So all of the data flow kind of happens in the back channel in a secure encrypted way. It doesn't pass through the front end customers' web browsers and things like that. So it's a really good model to keep things really secure. In terms of the data that's provided, it's all sorts of things. It's information about accounts and transactions, balances, loans, information about credit cards, interest rates, a whole gamut of information that's just sort of expanding day by day. Yodlee takes the data that we receive from these different organizations and then goes through an enrichment process as well. There are small differences sometimes in the way things are represented, but also we do value-added stuff like transaction categorization, geocoding, et cetera, to make it more useful for our customers. And we just present sort of a single connection point, in this case for Lumiant. So they just connect to us and get the data to us rather than worrying about connecting to 120 banks and all sorts of other things. So it's much simpler for both of us to that way around. So I don't know whether you want me to add to that. But...
Always, we could go on about this for hours, I think. So we'll see if there's some questions coming through from the audience here. But if I might kick off on one, so there's a couple really great things that you guys both spoke about around data security and how the work that you do protects the end consumer's data. Now, without naming companies, it's probably in Australia a bit of a hot topic at the moment. Can you talk about how Yodlee and the work you guys do protects the end consumer's data? And then Chris, maybe we might get your comment from Lumiant's perspective as well.
Yeah, I guess data sharing has been going on since the beginning of time. You think back maybe applying for a loan, you would copy your bank statements and somebody would print them out and shove them in a drawer, and somebody would photocopy your passport and all of those things. The problem with that, I guess, is information sort of ends up all over the place, and as we know from recent news, it's not always well protected. So CDR has a broad set of protections in place called the privacy safeguards, which aim to protect consumers' data. Some of that protection's on a kind of technical level, so there's a huge set of cybersecurity controls and things like that have to be in place to try and prevent hackers and things accessing data, but there are also controls in terms of keeping data over time. So there are rules about deletion and de-identification, and once a consent expires, the data has to be deleted or de-identified as per what the customer consented to. In addition to that, the consumers have a right to delete. So during the consent process, they can specifically say that I want my data to be deleted when the consent's over, and they're finished with whatever they're doing, if that makes sense. So really strong technical protections, very strong policy protections, really huge fines if it all goes badly for the accredited parties involved, so the banks and Yodlee particularly. And I would say definitely been front of mind from all the participants, and how it can be a better, more secure way to share versus some of those old methods.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is one of the key reasons why we decided to partner with Yodlee. That they take the level of security very seriously, and they always have been right from the get-go. As I mentioned, at Lumiant, we're really big fans of open banking and everything with the entire set of regulations that go around that in order to mandate that data security. In and above all of that, one thing that we're going to be doing within Lumiant itself is, as part of rolling out Yodlee more broadly, we're going to mandate two-factor authentication across Lumiant, and following on from recent cases that have happened in the media. We're going to secure things down, so no longer will an SMS code be sufficient. You will need to use an authenticator. And really, that's there to make sure that a client's data is always going to be protected. So we fundamentally believe in security has to be done in a multi-layered process. It's fantastic that Yodlee are doing the bulk of it for us, and we that's why we partnered with them. We want to make sure that we have additional layers on top of that to once again just demonstrate back to our users and their clients that all the data that's going to be brought into the platform is going to be done so in a very secure manner.
Thanks, Chris. And maybe an extra question. I can see some questions coming through. We'll get to those in 1 second. We've alluded to some of the cool things that Yodlee can do, and you spoke a little bit about what's coming up from a security perspective, Chris. For all our Lumiant users, can you maybe talk about what the Yodlee integration, I guess maybe what doors it opens for us within the module? John was talking about transaction data could be available. We've got some exciting things planned for it. Do you want to maybe give a little bit of a taster around, now that we've got the Yodlee integration, where we can get through the wealth module, your investments, your sort of bank accounts, your liabilities, what's next for us?
Awesome question, Mark. So we've actually got 2 new modules that are currently in kind of beta testing. They're with our innovation hub. One is called Originations, which is kind of taking the client through that onboarding journey. And this is both used for new prospects, new leads, as well as clients where you may have some information about them, but you may not have all the information about them. What they do, in addition to Yodlee, is it kind of fast tracks your ability to be able to collect the data that you need from a KYC point of view, in terms of understanding what is it that this client owns, what do they need help with. The other module that is about to go live is called Governance, and this is kind of our hub for all the information pertaining to a particular household. So this is everything from the clients themselves or their family members, so that way we can build a family tree, through to all their balance sheets, so all of their trusts, their companies, assets, liabilities, insurances, etc. So as you can imagine, a whole lot of data that is collected, which if it has to be put in manually, it can be done, but error prone and hard to do. with the help of Yodlee, it really is as simple as hooking in, your insurance provider and your wherever you happen to have your savings account, and whichever platform you happen to have all of your investments on, and it will automatically flow through. You'll be able to see a visualization of all of that data. You'll know what has been synchronized with Lumiant thanks to Yodlee, and you'll be in control over for what period of time. So to John's point, previously within Australia, we had to keep data for a minimum of 7 years. Open banking changes that. If you want to remove your data, you can do so. So Yodlee is a massive efficiency and scale play in terms of both helping your end clients see a whole of wealth view across all of their individual investments, savings, etc. As well as just kind of simplifying and minimizing fat finger, typing errors and all the rest of it, making sure that the data that's actually there is correct and up to date, which is the hard part in all of this.
Beautiful. So great question here from the audience. I'm going to be looking down at my laptop as I read this out. I don't want to miss it. Are there any ways to share data through CDR with Yodlee without providing a personal banking login? Some banks in Australia, for example, Macquarie, have issues with this in their T&Cs. So who wants to take that on? John? Great.
So basically the answer is with CDR, you never use a personal banking login. Essentially, the authentication process is regulated, and it's a one-time password process. So you may put in a phone number or maybe your customer number or an email address as relevant to the bank, but then through some mechanism, you receive a one-time password and you use that to authenticate to data share. There's no use of your password, for example, in the process.
And if I can just add to that, so yeah, Macquarie Bank is a big one here in Australia. In the US, you've got the likes of Chase Bank, and now things like Bank of America, who are basically going to turn off any other means of accessing data other than through open banking, but by December 2nd. So we're going to see more and more of this, where large institutions are basically only going to allow you to access data through an open banking channel. So to John's point, you aren't sharing your login and password details. You are accessing everything from an open banking point of view. That initial set of credentials that you're passing through is just to validate who you are. Once you've done that, the open banking side of it doesn't try and log in as you. So neither Lumiant nor Yodlee ever see your login details.
So I guess looking at the CDR and kind of where it is today, and kind of on that point, I think I touched on it earlier, but we've kind of seen the evolution of CDR through, or different versions of CDR through a number of different markets across the world. So we're obviously running open banking in the US, which is a very different model, and then again in the UK. If we take a step back from that and look at kind of where Yodlee's been, I guess we pioneered web-based data aggregation back in 1999. So that was very much screen scraping and kind of working through that. We've learned a number of lessons along the way in terms of how data is transferred, and that kind of back to what John was saying about how data has always been shared, just different ways of doing it and different channels of doing it. CDR in Australia is in a really, really good place at the moment in terms of what is happening from a regulatory perspective, but also from an intermediary perspective in terms of what we're doing with our partners and our clients to make sure that data and that access is really secure. And so if you think of how screen scraping works and how we've had to really kind of make sure that everything in the screen scraping world in terms of providing those logins and the user credentials has always been kept safe. If you think of the partners that we work with the top 16 of the top global 20 banks. So we're trusted by 15 of the top 15 wealth management business in the world. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by really studying the cases of what security needs to look like in web-based data aggregation, but then also working with regulators locally and internationally in terms of what needs to happen on a CDR front and how CDR pivots to make sure from web-based data aggregation to make sure that both the client is comfortable, the bank is comfortable, and the client partner of ours is comfortable as well.
Thanks, Tanner. So I'm just monitoring here. There's no more questions just yet. So we're on time, but if there's any final questions, have a go. But a couple things in terms of housekeeping before we wrap up today. So if you're sitting there thinking, this is great, I want access to this, I want to have a play around. If you're a professional package user here at Lumiant, you have access to Yodlee. Yodlee's turned on as part of your access to the Your Wealth module, ready to go. You can reach out to your lovely customer success representative for a bit of a tour if you'd like to as well. We're more than happy to come and show you through for your first time. If you're a starter package user and you want to upgrade, feel free. There's a survey at the end of this that asks for your email address, or you can reach out to, once again, your customer success representative, and we'd be happy to talk you through what that process would look like and help you out with that and show you around. And equally, if you're looking at this for the first time and want to chat to us, as I mentioned, there's a survey at the end of this with a question just to see if you really liked the webinar. Make comment to the lovely production room that we've got here from Stone and Chalk as well. But if you want to speak to one of our team, because you've been speaking to us already, please put your email in the question that you get asked at the end of this survey. But on behalf of the entire Lumiant audience, firstly, thank you to you for logging in. Thank you, John and Tanner, for getting on the light rail, coming down George Street in Sydney and coming to visit us at our lovely new offices. And thanks, Chris, for taking the time out of your busy day to talk us through the exciting news and the exciting partnership for all our Lumiant customers.
Thank you.